Hello and welcome to Legal Conscience. I am Advocate Vikas Jassi and the topic for today's discussion is Goods and Services Tax. I will be making 4 videos on this topic. The first 2 videos are going to focus on GST law as such, as it was introduced in the year 2017, the laws that were passed, the organizations and the institutions that were formed, and the concepts and the mechanisms that were introduced for the rollout and functioning of GST law in the country. So these will be discussed in the first 2 videos. From 22nd of September 2025, some reforms have been introduced into the GST law, which are being popularly called as GST 2.0. They will be discussed in the subsequent 2 videos, the third and fourth video. Now let us begin with discussions on the basics of the GST law. First things first, it was not easy to implement the GST law in the country because the very framework of the GST law had a direct contestation with the concept of federalism in Indian polity, as it mandated the pooling in of different taxation subjects of both state and center into a single basket and submission to a single taxation law throughout the country, whereas the previous system provided for separate subject of taxation for both state and center on which they had their exclusive controls. And federalism, mind you, as a principle of governance, holds a key position in Indian polity and governance. It's a kind of system, it's a kind of polity where the division of power between the central authority and the peripheral entities is provided for by the highest law of the land. And in the Indian context, that translates to the power being divided between the union and the states by the very Constitution of India. Constitution of India provides for legislative, executive and financial federalism or fiscal federalism. Judiciary, interestingly, is governed by an integrated judicial system which takes care of both the central and the state laws. Federalism has also been held to be one of the important ingredients of the basic structure of the Constitution, as has been upheld by the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of the Bharti case 1973 and the S.R. Bomai case 1994. Of our interest for today's discussion is the fiscal or the financial federalism, because the GST law has profoundly impacted the same and moved the country from separate system of levies and appropriation by different tiers of the government to a unified dual system of taxation based upon the principles of cooperative federalism. Right, so now let us for a moment see the previous laws that existed before the advent of GST law. Earlier we had a complex and a multi-layered system of indirect taxation in the country, where both center and state separately levied and appropriated taxes on the different taxation subjects, and there were different taxes on the manufacturing activity, on the sale and on the consumption at different levels of the governance. So all that added up and made the things a bit difficult for the administration. The essential taxes of the central government and that were existing prior to the rollout of GST were, first of all, it was the central excise duty. Now this was the most important taxation of the central government, which was on the manufacturing activity of the in the economy, the manufacturing activities. There was a service tax which was levied on the various services that were provided in the country. Other than that, we had additional duties of customs like countervailing duty. So it was to make the Indian domestic products competitive vis-a-vis the imported products. So it was imposed upon the imported products, right? And then also we had what central sales tax, which was levied by the central government but appropriated by the origin state, right? Origin state would mean that the state where the product has been manufactured, produced, or it originated from. The fundamental shift that has come now, because the GST law has made the taxation a destination based activity. We'll be discussing that in the course of discussion. And other than these laws from the central government, there were a host of cesses and surcharges that were subsumed into the GST law. Now, as far as the states are concerned, the most important, the fundamental law of the state that went into this is the state sales tax or VAT. Now, this state sales tax or VAT is the principal tax of the state, and it was on sale of activities, sale of goods and services within the states, right? And every state had its own rules and compliances for the same, making things very complicated for interstate movement of goods and services. Other than that, we had entry tax or octroi tax. So it was levied on the movement of goods in the territory of the state or local bodies, right? So at the borders, or if they were to pass through the state, so these kind of taxes were imposed there and then. After that, we had entertainment tax, which was imposed upon the entertainment activities or amusement activities like movie tickets and amusement parks and sports activities, etc. And then we had luxury tax. Now it was imposed upon some luxury items like some luxury cars or high-end luxury hotel accommodations, like that. Other than that, we also had taxes on betting and gambling, on advertisement, and on lotteries. So this is all what the state government was dealing with, and previously we just discussed the central government's taxes. All these taxes have been subsumed into the GST law, thereby making it a uniform, single, unified law of the country. A total of 17 important indirect taxes have subsumed into the GST law. Out of them, 8 are from the central these subjects or central taxation, and 9 are from the state's taxation powers. So that is how the GST law has unified taxation system in the country, and all these taxes that we just mentioned, they have now vanished. This fragmented kind of a system meant that there was a complex web of compliances that the businesses had to go through, which made the process very inefficient, and the businesses would hesitate from venturing into new things or from expanding their base as such. Now, the previous system led to complexity and lack of uniformity. It had cascading effect, that is tax on tax. Now, this is very important. Cascading effect, tax on tax. This is going to be discussed in detail in some time, so we'll just come to that. So save it for now. And then there was a limited opportunity to claim credit of the taxes. Again, it's related to the input tax credit system, that is tax on tax only. And then it led to the Indian products becoming incompetitive domestically and globally, because the prices would soar higher compared to what they would have otherwise been charged at, had there been not so many taxes applicable on a single product throughout the product's journey. And then we had the evasion of taxes taking place, right? So when the system is complex and the web is very cumbersome, so people tend to evade taxes, and it leads to the growth of the informal economy as well. Also, the previous system was a barrier to the interstate movement of goods and services. So owing to all these difficulties, it was long desired, right, for the by the government of India to bring about some major reforms in the indirect taxation system of the country. And in the year 2002, there was a task force by the name Vijay Kelkar Task Force on Tax Reforms. Now, Vijay L. Kelkar is an Indian economist who headed lot of committees regarding the financial sector in the country. And some of the important committees headed by him was like Vijay Kelkar Committee on Public-Private Partnership, on Fiscal Consolidation. Likewise, we had a committee on the taxation reforms, like it was called Task Force on Taxation Reforms. In the year 2002, mind you, 2002, the Vijay Kelkar Task Force on Tax Reforms recommended that the country requires a GST law based upon VAT principles, right? So after that, in the year 2006-7 budget, for the first time on the floor of the parliament, it was said that the country is committed to have a GST law in place, and the government started working on it from there on. Empowered committee of ministers thereon started making the draft law for the GST. Now let us see what all laws have gone into making GST a reality. First of all, it was the 122nd Constitutional Amendment Bill that was introduced in the year 2016. It was passed in the same year, and it was notified as 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. Now, this was the introductory provision for the bringing of GST law in the country, right? It was an enabling provision. So based upon this law, 4 different acts were passed by the Parliament of India in the year 2017, the subsequent year. So first one was the CGST Act, Central Goods and Services Tax Act 2017. Then we had UTGST Act, Union Territories Goods and Services Act 2017. Then we had IGST Act, Integrated Goods and Services Act 2017, and we had GST Compensation to States Act 2017. Now what about the SGST, the State Goods and Services Tax? Well, the SGST acts were not passed by the parliament, they were passed by the respective states, right? And UTs with legislature as well. So all the states and passed their own SGST acts, and these acts, CGST, UTGST, IGST, and GST Compensation to States Act, they were passed by the union, that is the parliament, right? And all the laws came into effect, the central laws, they came into effect from 1st of July 2017, right? Now while the laws were passed or discussed in the parliament, just a day prior to the laws coming into force, we just discussed that the laws came into force from 1st of July 2017. On 30th of June 2017, in the central hall of the parliament, none other than the then President of India and the former Finance Minister of the country, Dr. Pranab Mukherjee, made a critical statement on the GST, on the passing of the GST laws. He said, and I quote, he said that GST is the result of a broad consensus arrived at between the center and the states, and is a tribute to the maturity and wisdom of India's democracy. See the gravity. Right, now let us see the definition and core ingredients of the GST law, of GST. I'll just read it out for you. GST is a comprehensive, multi-stage, destination-based consumption tax levied on the supply of goods and services across India. Right. It's a tax, it's an indirect tax. It's a tax that is levied on what? On the supply of goods and services. Now let's see the details. It is comprehensive. It is multi-stage. It is destination-based consumption tax. Now, why are we calling it comprehensive? We just discussed a while ago that there were 17 major indirect taxes, 8 from the center, 9 from the states, and host of cesses and surcharges that were subsumed into one unified tax, which is the GST law. So that is what makes it comprehensive. Other than that, it is also comprehensive in the sense that it covers most of the taxation subjects, the items in the country, barring only few exceptions. Most of the goods and services are covered by this very law. That is again something that makes it comprehensive. And the third point is that it's a one nation, one tax. It applies to the entire length and breadth of the country, and with the same set of rules and the compliance requirements. That has literally streamlined a lot of things. So that is what makes it comprehensive law. Now what about multi-stage? Why is it a multi-stage law? It is multi-stage because it is levied at each and every step of the product's journey. Let's just see the steps for a moment. A manufacturer, he would require some raw material that is supplied by the supplier. So first of all, we have a supplier of raw material. Then we have a manufacturer. Then we have the wholesaler. Then we have the retailer, and then we have the final consumer. So at each stage, GST is applied based upon the principles of VAT, just like the Kelkar committee recommended in 2002. Now, when a manufacturer purchases raw materials from the supplier, he pays GST to the supplier. Suppose he purchased raw material for rupees 100, and 18% is the rate of taxation. So he will pay him 118 rupees, and 18 rupees that supplier will remit to the government of India in form of his tax to the government. Now, if this manufacturer, after manufacturing and packaging and everything, sells it to the wholesaler for 200 rupees, at the same rate of 18%, he would be required to pay 36 rupees as the GST. Now, on the same product, he earlier paid 18 rupees to the supplier as GST. So at this point of time, instead of paying 36 rupees, he can take the credit of the previous 18 rupees that he has paid to the supplier, and instead of 36, he can pay only 18 rupees. So that is how credit is claimed at this stage. This is the input tax credit system. It will be discussed in detail in the second video with some instances and examples as well. Just running through it because we're just seeing the stages. So at each stage, VAT is applied on the incremental value, on the value additions at each stage, right? And the third point is that it is a destination based tax. Now, why is it a destination based tax? Over here, a state that manufactures a product does not get anything, but the state where the product is sold, where it is reaching the household of the final consumer, the proceeds of the taxation will go to that state. That is the destination state. It is the end consumer which bears the ultimate cost of the taxation. So that always has been, that always will be. Ultimately, the burden will be borne by the end consumer only. Now, there are various types of GST that came into existence. We just said that there was CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST. CGST is Central Goods and Services Tax, levied and appropriated by the center on intra-state supply of goods and services. Intra-state, mind you. SGST, levied and appropriated by the state government on intra-state supply of goods and services. And both these laws, SGST and CGST, they are applied simultaneously. That is what makes the GST system a dual kind of a system. On a product, on a sale of a single product, at the same time, two different taxes apply. They're both part and parcel of GST system only. SGST, CGST. The CGST proceeds go to the central government, the SGST proceeds go to the state government. And the division is 50-50 basis, like if 18% is the rate of taxation on some product, 9 to state and center. If it is 12%, 6 and 6, so on and so forth. So that is CGST and SGST. Now we had IGST, Integrated Goods and Services Tax. This applied on the interstate supply of goods and services, not intrastate. Now this is IGST is interstate supply of goods and services, as well as on imports and export, and it is levied and appropriated by the central government, and later on the proceeds of this taxation are shared between the center and the states based upon a destination based formula of the GST system. There is a destination based principle. We'll discuss that in some time. So that's about the different types of laws. And UTGST, it is the UT counterpart of SGST in the UT, again charged along with CGST, which do not have legislature. The UT such as Chandigarh and Lakshadweep. And on the recommendation of GST Council, a very important body, we'll be discussing it later. On the recommendation of GST Council, the Government of India has notified that the UT GST will not exceed 20% in any case, right? The highest tax slab that was there was 28%, but as per this notification of the Government of India, it would not be more than 20%, right? The different rate slabs that were introduced in the economic system when the GST law was introduced the first time. So first of all, considering 0 to be one of the slabs, there were 5 slabs: 0, 5, 12, 18 and 28. The 0 slab would apply on all the goods that were essential goods, like fresh fruits, vegetable, milk and salt. 5% slab applied on common items like spices, packaged food, sugar and oil, etc. Then we had 12% slabs on the processed foods like butter, ghee, fruit juice, as well as some consumer goods. 18% for most standard goods and services. It would include most of the electronic items, the IT services, and host of other goods and services, because it's the most standard item. Mind you, most of the collections came from this slab only. The details we'll discuss perhaps in the third video, when we'll come to the tinkering of these slabs by the new system of taxation that has kicked in recently. But right now we're just going to the previous slabs that existed when the law was introduced, and this system, mind you, continued for 8 odd years. So we'll be discussing in the second video as to how the system has fared in the 8 years as well. And then lastly, we had a 28% slab that is applicable on the luxury goods or sin goods like aerated drinks, tobacco products and automobiles. And on the products that fell in this category of 28% were also the products upon which GST compensation cess was applied. This subtopic we are going to discuss in the second video in detail. GST compensation cess, which was based upon the GST Compensation States Act, which was passed along with the 3 other acts in the year 2017 by the Parliament of India, and this compensation says rate had a very wide range. It ranged from I think 5-10% to as high as 290%. So it was about compensating the states and for the loss they would have beared by submitting themselves to this new system of taxation. Details in the next video. Alright, and now in the end, let us just for a moment see the key objectives of GST law. So we've just almost gone through them, just some template that we have to run through. It is simplifying the key of one of the key objectives, simplifying the tax structure by one nation one tax system, simplifies the taxation law, same set of rules throughout the country. Fine with that. Then eliminates the cascading effect, input tax credit, and preventing tax on tax by introducing the concept of input tax credit. Discussion on the second video. Then the third one is fostering economic growth. And how does it do so? Building common national market, it does so. And widening the taxpayers base, it has happened. And providing competitive pricing and consumption. So all these lead to fostering the economic growth. And lastly, enhancing transparency and compliance. So reduces tax evasion and informal economy, it does so. And regarding compliance, the online compliance is affected by the robust GST IT infrastructure, that is the responsibility of whom has been taken by the GSTN, Goods and Services Tax Network, another important institution, important organization that we're going to discuss in the next video. Right. So that was a basic discussion on the GST law, the reasoning underlying the entire GST concept. And in the next video we're going to discuss on the GST Council, Goods and Services Tax Network, on anti-profiteering measures, e-way bills, inverted duty structure, input tax credit, and host of other relevant topics. Hope you like this video, and thank you for staying till the end, and stay tuned for next video. Bye for now.